Hello, everyone. This is Tim Horn. Welcome back to my podcast and author's advice. As you remember from last episode, I'm creating this podcast to share my many years of writing experience with you guys. Today, I have Jean Klinger here with me, and she is going to ask me some questions for this episode.
Hi, Tim. Okay, what intrigued you to become a writer in the first place?
Well, that's a good question. Writing has always been something I've enjoyed doing, even when I was little. I started out with poetry, and as I said in the last episode, during my senior year of high school, I started writing my first detective novel. And I've always enjoyed coming up with the characters, making the plot, and getting to make the idea I have really come to life for people to read.
Good, thank you. Okay, so you already asked or answered this. When did you first know that you wanted to be a writer? And you said that was at a very young age, right? Do you want to expand on that at all or no?
Sure. I was, I believe, around 11 years old when I first started writing poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And that poetry actually turned into some of the pieces that I used in my children's book, The Wonderful World of Poems. Most of those were written at a very early age and over the years, and eventually I decided to compile them into a collection. So it's always been a fun hobby I've had.
Wonderful. And so you continued writing since then. That's different things, right?
I've tried many different topics over the years. I've done, as I said, children's poetry, detective novels, more recently short stories. So I've dabbled in a lot of different fields and genres.
Great. Okay, so I'm old. I used to watch the Waltons all the time, and John Boy, of course, wanted to write, and he was told, write what you know. Do you sometimes write what you know from life?
I think that you can draw inspiration from what you know. And as a creative writer, I also like to make up my own world, my own characters, but definitely going from writing from what you know is a good idea because growing up, we used to watch a lot of detective series like NCIS and Blue Bloods, and I think those were a lot of the inspiration I used from that to write my detective novels. So, I would definitely agree with write what you know is a good idea that writers should do.
Okay, thank you. Now, another John Boy question. He came from a big family, and it was hard for him to find a quiet place to write. Do you prefer a quiet place when you write?
Actually, I did touch on this during our last episode. Having a quiet place that you can go to write is an essential part of the process because there are always going to be distractions in life, whether it be people or technology or whatever the case may be. And having a quiet place you can go to just be alone with your thoughts and be alone with the blank page is definitely something that is important to me as a writer. And I think for all writers, having their own space they can go to clear their head and think about things is very important.
Okay, do you have trouble doing that in your situation?
It depends upon the day, I guess. But most times, you have your place, and as I said before, writing all the time, it's not something you want to do. You still want to have time for friends and family, but, making sure that you have enough time every day to just set aside maybe 30 minutes or an hour, just to have that time to put your thoughts on the page and, develop your plot. But yeah, definitely having that time and that quiet place are very important.
It seems like you like to fit it into your everyday, and I think that's, well, for me, I think about writing a little bit. The only thing I've ever really written much of is letters to the editor in the newspaper, and they're short, of course. But sometimes I think about writing a memoir because I'm getting old, but I don't know how to get started, and so I don't start. I just can't get to the point like you are in where you can set aside time each day. I just kind of just keep pushing it off. So, do you have any advice in that to just make time, I guess?
Well, like I said, balancing your schedule is very important because we all have responsibilities in life,
Right.
whether it be
Yep.
family, school, work. So there has to be that balance of you're taking care of the things you need to take care of, but also finding enough time to write.
Hmm.
Because as you said, a big problem I see with writers is people want to write stories, but they never get around to doing it, or it kind of gets shelved and then it just never gets done. So having that consistency, making sure that you're able to get to the finished product is very important if you want to see a completed book at anytime soon.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll try it. I will make up a schedule. Maybe that would help me. Okay. So, this you kind of covered. When you come up with an idea, how do you start from that one idea? Do you just start writing, or do you? I don't know.
Well, it depends upon how long of a story. If it's a short story versus if it's a full length novel,
Right.
but I would always say start with an outline. Where do you want the story to go? That way, you have kind of like a guide or a map to your story.
I like that.
You also have to realize that your story is going to look drastically different at the end from where you started. So, you know, acknowledging that it's going to change, new ideas are going to pop up, but having your core of this is where I want the story to start, this is where I want the story to end, and then you have everything in between is just kind of connecting those dots. So, I would definitely say starting with an outline and
Oh, I like that idea.
coming up with your main characters. Another thing that you have to ask yourself when writing any story is what do you want your readers to get out of it at the end of the day?
Oh,
Because everybody knows that stories are supposed to be entertaining. I mean, we read stories for fun and for enjoyment, but there also should be a lesson that's being learned
ah,
from your story. So, you're asking yourself, as the writer, what do I want the readers to get from this?
very good. I never thought about an outline. That's a neat idea. I like that. Okay, so how about writer's block? Do you ever experience that?
Yeah, writer's block has definitely, and I think I speak for all writers when I say writer's block is a real problem. There are just some days where you go down to write and you don't feel like writing, or there's just the ideas aren't there. And I've had times, I said this before, where in one weekend I was able to write 3 chapters
Wow.
of a book, and then there are times when I go down to write and I can't finish a page to save my life. So it's just, it's not something you can predict. It kind of happens where it's just like some days you're full of ideas and you can't wait to write them all down, and some days you just kind of have nothing in the tank.
Mm-hmm.
So writer's block is definitely a real issue. And as far as how to deal with it, I would definitely say that, even if you're not writing something that you think you're going to put in your story, you should always try and write something. Just try to jot something down because maybe it may be an idea that you might come back to and you might like it someday. So
Very
I
good.
think the best way to do it is just keep writing and, eventually you'll come up with
Yep.
something that you like.
Good. I like that. Very good. Thank you. Um, hmm. I probably know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you write with a pen, typewriter, or computer?
I write on my laptop.
Okay.
Yep.
That's
I like you. Sometimes I do take down notes. Like if I have a piece of paper, sometimes I use my phone. Just whatever I have at the time in my hand. If I'm at work, I can't use my phone. I might be able to take a minute and write down some notes. But as far as the actual writing process, I use Microsoft Word on my laptop.
okay. Well, of course, me being old fashioned, I would definitely use a pen or maybe a pencil, but I'm old fashioned. Anyways, okay. Now, this you kind of just talked about either. Also, I've heard of writers who get an idea in the middle of doing something, and you just said that happens, and they might write down something on a napkin or something. But you said you would probably. Well, go ahead. You can answer that again.
Sure. Like I said, I might use my phone, but sometimes at work you're in a situation where you can't just pull out your phone. But if you have a minute when you're not working, I would say put it on the phone, put it on a notebook. Some people carry notebooks around in their pocket. So,
That's a good idea.
whatever you have at the time on hand to write down your idea, I would definitely say you should do that, because sometimes it may be there 1 minute and then you get home 5 hours later and you're like, oh man, what was that really great idea I had? And you completely forgot. It happens to the best of us. So I would definitely say, if you have a minute when you're not busy, write it down and revisit it later. Another piece of advice is, I've heard that when you're first going to sleep at night, that's generally when ideas, like when you're transitioning to sleep, a lot of good ideas pop up there.
Oh,
So I would say have something maybe by your bed where it's like, if you just have a good idea suddenly pop up, you can write it down.
that's a very
just
good idea.
before you go to sleep, because you don't want to waste those good ideas as they come. You want to make sure you're getting everything jotted down.
That's a very good idea. And I guess you always have to be ready for ideas in some way, because, you don't want to lose them. But you have been very helpful to me, and I wish you luck with all your writing. And maybe someday I will let you know that I have started writing my memoir. But I thank you for all of your wonderful advice. And I'm going to have to keep my notebook handy where I won't lose it.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome, and thank you for joining me today. Remember, guys, if you want to check out any of my materials, you can find it on timstales.net. I have my YouTube channel, my podcast, my monthly newsletter, along with all the information on my books. And if you would have a topic or question you would like to ask me and you'd like to be on here with me, get in touch with me, send your information in, and maybe next time this can be you on the air with me. So thank you guys for tuning in today. And until next time, have a nice day.